East Hampton Town Board, we are live streaming on YouTube, the channel, and our live stream, and we are ready to go.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the June 14th work session of the East Hampton Town Board. Carol, would you please read the roll call?
Present.
Present.
Here. Present.
President, please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today's work session, we're going to start with the East Hampton Town Police Department swearing in ceremony. I'd like to introduce our chief, Michael Sarlo. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning. Thank you. We've made several recent promotions in the past few months, and we took the opportunity to bring everyone together here today to formally swear them into their new official ranks. So we'd like to take a few minutes of your time to go through the formal process and let Carol Brennan, the town clerk, read the oath of office for each of these officers. We have Lieutenant Chelsea Tierney, Lieutenant Daniel Toya, Detective Sergeant Ryan Hogan, Sergeant Ryan Fink, and Detective Luke McNamara, who have all earned the right to promotion. And we have a tremendous amount of pride in the work they do, and we congratulate them, and we want to put them forward here today for the town board.
Thank you, Chief.
Council first. I, Chelsea Tierney, do solemnly swear. Do solemnly swear. I support the Constitution of the United States. Support the Constitution of the United States. Constitution of the State of New York. Constitution of the State of New York. And faithfully discharge the according to the best of my ability. Congratulations. Raise your right hand, repeat after me. I, Daniel Toya.
I, Daniel Toya,
Do solemnly swear.
do solemnly swear
I will support the Constitution of the United States.
I will support the Constitution of the United States
The Constitution of the State of New York.
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
Faithfully discharge the duties of lieutenant
and faithfully discharge the duties of lieutenant
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan Hogan.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
I got
How are you? I, Ryan Hogan.
I, Ryan Hogan,
Do solemnly swear.
do solemnly swear
I support the Constitution of the United States.
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
The Constitution of the State of New York.
and the Constitution of the State of New York.
Faithfully discharge the duties of Detective Sergeant.
I will faithfully
Discharge the duties of Detective Sergeant
discharge the duties of Detective Sergeant
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Ryan, good morning. I, Ryan,
I, Ryan Fink,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and faithfully discharge the duties of sergeant
and faithfully discharge the duties of sergeant
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. Thank you.
solemnly swear
I support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
and I faithfully discharge the duties of
and I will faithfully discharge the duties of
detective
detective
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
I just want to thank the board for all their support and continuing to allow us to backfill promotional positions and maintain the command structure of our department. I want to congratulate each of these officers on all the hard work and time and effort that they've put into their careers, the profession of policing, and to helping support and protect this community. And I congratulate them all. I thank their families for their commitment and support. And we're ready for another summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And I want to congratulate you and the department on the recent reaccreditation, the recognition by the New York State Department of Criminal Justice in Albany. You guys, congratulate each and every one of you for your service to our community. We thank you for your service, keeping us safe and making us proud.
Thank you.
So next up, we have the public portion of the meeting where any member of the public may address the board on any topic. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And I guess do we have a sign-up sheet? Carol, anyone signed up?
No.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the board? Jose, welcome. Please state your name for the record.
I certainly will. Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Jose Arandia. I'm a resident in Waynescott, New York. How are you all today?
Very well, thanks.
Great. I'm here to make sure that my voice is heard, since I was unable to come to the last board meeting, in support of a closure of the East Hampton Airport. It is no longer acceptable that we have a try to come to an agreement with the pilots associations. And I believe that the lawsuits that were instituted at the very end of the period just before the East Hampton Airport closure was scheduled was no less than a cheap shot at the town, and I think a disrespect for the town. We have all been working very diligently to come to an agreement for the East Hampton Airport, and all we see from I'll refer to them as the pilots groups or associations, is a I don't care attitude. We're going to do it. We're going to do it our way. And finding a judge that would provide an injunction or a temporary restraining order at the very last minute shows a lack of cooperation or coming to the table with an open mind. So for that, I want to reaffirm that I am now in full support of closure of the airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Anyone else wish to address the board? Do we have any callers on the line, Jason?
We have no callers on the line.
Okay, we have several topics that we'll be discussing today. The first topic of discussion is Community Housing Fund Draft Implementation Plan. We have our Planning Director, Jeremy Samuelson, here. Welcome, Jeremy.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to share information with you. Just make sure we're ready to go. Oh. How do we want to do this?
We need someone to operate the.
Would you like me to do it?
Sorry,
Shall
let's see
that
if
then?
Nick's available.
Or Ann can manage it.
Yeah, Nick is
One-
downstairs.
Is Nick downstairs?
Ann is available as well.
You want me to run and grab her?
Yeah, why don't you grab her? In the meantime, do we have any callers that have called in? Jason?
No, still clear on that line.
Okay. I'll just briefly let folks know what the other topics of discussion are today. Chapter 160 and 162 revisions, and this relates to the community housing as well. We have our Assistant Town Attorney, Jen Nigro, here. We'll be presenting that a little later. Proposed 255, 1163 regarding affordable accessory apartments. Again, Jen Nigro from the attorney's office will be presenting those revisions as well. And I guess we're just about ready to start with the PowerPoint. And
Nick is on his way up. So, Ann, when Nick gets here, we'll relieve you of your duty.
so just as a matter of background, the Community Housing Fund legislation was passed by the New York State Legislature last year. The governor signed it into law, I believe in December, that allows the 5 East End towns to establish community housing fund, which is based on a 0.5% transfer tax. And that's very similar setup to what the Community Preservation Fund is in terms of transfer tax. It's a tax based on levied on the purchases of real estate. The purchaser pays that, and would be going into a fund, and in this case, to address housing crisis that we have here on the East End. So I believe we have the PowerPoint up. Jeremy, if you'd like to continue.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
All right, so we are here again, as the supervisor said, to discuss the draft plan of the Community Housing Fund. This is typically referred to as the project plan. So I will be sharing with you a couple of slides that highlight information that's contained in the draft that is available on the town's website and that you all have received electronically. The point of this is for us to begin discussing the details of this, how the fund could be used, sharing that information with the public, letting you all ask questions, and beginning to point towards a public hearing where this would actually be subject to public comment and review by all of you so that it could, in whatever version we decide goes forward, be adopted so that if the voters decide in November to pass this referendum, we're able to hit the ground running in January with a plan that's ready for prime time. So looking at the first slide, I want to share with you why this program is necessary. Essentially, what is the need? There you go. If you look at the information that's here, I think this begins to tell the story of the crisis that our community is facing. Between 2010 and 2020, the population of East Hampton Town, as documented by the U.S. Census, grew by roughly a third to approximately 28,000 people, a little more than that. Many people have observed, the supervisor included, that that is likely an undercount, but for the sake of this conversation, let's just use that number. 1/3 growth in the community over 10 years is extraordinary. And there are a series of impacts that we can logically follow that will come from that. In this case, we know that affordable housing did not grow during that period. It either stayed the same or slightly reduced. During that same period of approximately 2010 to 2020, there were 600 roughly new housing units that were created in the town of East Hampton, and they followed the trend that has characterized housing in East Hampton over the last several decades, meaning roughly 60% of that was for second homeowners or part-time seasonal use. And the balance of it, 40% or roughly 40%, was used year-round by full-time residents. So that got us to a total of about 21,655. That's a very specific number, but it's not an exact number in terms of us swearing that that's exactly how many housing units are out there, but that's roughly our housing stock in the community. Of that, roughly 3% can be described and confirmed as affordable housing. So if you just zoom way out here and you ask yourself, how are we addressing the need of affordable housing in East Hampton Town at this point? The answer is to the tune of about 3%. And then a logical question follows from that. Is that sufficient to meet the need? And I think the obvious answer that we all know from the relationships that we have with fellow community members and from our experiences around town, seeing all of the help wanted signs and knowing how struggling businesses are and even the town itself to fill open positions, we all know that that 3% number is not an adequate percentage of the whole. Furthermore, 25% of all town households are, quote, dealing with severe housing problems. That's a term of art that comes from the census, and what they measure is the percentage of households that are spending 50% or more of their income on housing. So let's just let that sink in for a second. 25% of our community is spending 50% or more of their money to pay to keep a roof over their head and keep the lights on. A slightly lower bar is, 33% of mortgage holders in town pay 35% or greater to meet their basic housing needs. 70% or greater than 70% of renters pay more than 35% of their income for housing. So 70%, greater than 70% of the people in this community who are renting a house are paying more than a third of their income for housing. Why that number? Again, this is data that the U.S. Census collects. They have this data across the country, and it won't surprise you to know that we are way ahead, not in a good way, of the rest of Long Island. And the one exception is Southold Town, where they're slightly ahead of us by a percentage point or two in the mortgage category. But we have the rest of Long Island beat, and again, not in a good way. We have the rest of New York State beat, and we have much of the country beat. So there are a few exceptions out there nationally where people are struggling to the extent that we are with the percentage of income that people are having to pay for housing. So in addition to that, we have demographic considerations that also come into play here. We know the median age in East Hampton town has risen over the last couple of years to an average of 46.8. That again is just over 5 years ahead of the balance of Suffolk County. So we have an aging population, and that average age or the median age is actually going up over time. And what that reflects is that we are losing younger people and we are losing families from our community. I think, as we all know, again, as documented by the U.S. Census, those two categories, younger adults and families, have grown at a slower percentage or at a slower rate rather than the population growth for the community as a whole. Most startling in the data that we reviewed and trying to ask ourselves, what is the compelling need here for affordable housing in this community? Single parent households actually dropped between 2010 and 2020 by over 25%. So that's not, for any reason other than, well, that's perhaps too strong a statement. Apologies. Let me rephrase. We know that a major contributing factor to those single parent households leaving town is their struggles to find adequate housing. Right. So we're actually seeing a net loss in that category, whereas in some of the other categories, we're only seeing growth that is happening at a slower rate. So we have a real problem. And the problem hopefully gets addressed in part through the legislation that's on the table that allows us to create a new 0.5% real estate transfer tax. As I said to you the last time we discussed this, this would be in addition to the 2% or alongside the 2% existing community preservation fund tax that is currently in place since 1998. This new program would take effect in January, but we have hurdles that we have to get over in order to accomplish this. So if we look at the next slide, please, the planned timeline. We're right now in the June-July bracket where it says plan available. So this plan is literally available on the town's website. And we're hoping that people will contact my office, will contact Tom Rule's office, will contact all of you. We'll talk to each other and really dig into the meat of this 68 pages. If somebody were going to really focus somewhere in this plan, I would say the first couple of pages of the executive summary are very helpful in describing what you can actually do with this money and making the case for it. If you want to get a little deeper into it, I would say that pages 26 through 28 are particularly interesting from a just kind of wonkish perspective of how does something like this work. But I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to give you an overview of the types of things that can happen here. So in terms of where we are, we're right now in that June-July bracket. As I said, we're hoping that this actually gives rise to a robust public conversation about both the need and some of the solutions here and the benefits that could accrue to the community. From there, you see we would have a public hearing, ideally in July, that would be on this plan or whatever the final version of this plan would be. And then the next date that really matters from the public's perspective is November 8th. And that's election day when folks would have the opportunity to vote either in favor of this or not in favor of it. If it passes, then in January, as I said, the fund would actually become operational, and it would be the planning department's desire, and I know my counterparts in other departments, to hit the ground running in terms of fulfilling our responsibility to move the plan forward. Next slide, please. So what can you do with this money? So there's a complicated version of that that's in this 68-page plan, but we also wanted to have a plain language version where people could just digest it and say, okay, I think I actually understand in plain speak what this means. So I'll just read them to you. Buy land or buildings, fund town-led projects, design and build those projects, and those could be for sale or rent, meaning that whoever would live in there would either be getting a house that they would rent, or a unit that they would rent, or something that would be for sale. The fund could be used to fund public-private partnerships and pay for the design and build costs and also the maintenance costs of those projects. It could be used to rehabilitate and maintain existing buildings. It could be used to provide down payment assistance or other financial assistance to home buyers. I'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. It could be used to provide loans to construct accessory dwelling units. That's a term of art. What it means is, as you all will discuss later and you all know already, this is a unit that is either attached or unattached to an existing home and has very specific design requirements and would have very specific requirements for who could live there, having it be year-round, having it meet affordable criteria, et cetera. In addition, it could be used to create housing for employees of local businesses. It could also be used to buy individual units within existing multi-unit housing complexes, and it could also be used to provide housing counseling. So when we strip away all of the legal speak, these are really the core concepts that are available for using this fund if it is in fact adopted by the voters. So the benefits, if we can go to the next slide, please. The question with any program is always, who's going to benefit from this and how are we going to pay for it? Right. So in terms of who pays, you'll see on the top right-hand column there, this is paid for by the purchasers of homes in East Hampton town. First of all, anyone who's buying a house that's $2 million or above is going to pay the full freight on this. There are no exemptions. There are no breaks. If you are blessed enough to be buying a home at $2 million or above, this program would propose that you would pay tax on that full amount at 0.5%. And we'll look at a chart that shows what that would actually boil down to. For everybody else in this program, and I should actually say first-time home buyers are completely exempt, right? So they get a pass. It's an attempt to try to create home ownership within the community and get more people on that track to financial security. But for everybody else, the buyer, and very important that we underline, the buyer of the home here, not the seller. If you own a home, if you've had a home for a long time, you don't pay a dime. This is strictly paid by the buyer of a home, right? So everybody else under that $2 million number, and if you're not a first-time home buyer, you're actually going to only pay above $400,000 purchase price. So what that means is currently in the CPF law, as it stands now, the 2% real estate transfer tax, there's an exemption that covers the first $250,000, as you all know. That number was picked years ago, as we discussed last time I was here, because that, tied to roughly the price of an average home in East Hampton town. Those days are long behind us. And so now there was a need in creating this opportunity, this funding program, to bring up that number for transfer taxes for exemptions to $400,000. So I have a feeling I've made this more complicated than it needs to be. The takeaway information here is that what used to be a $250,000 exemption that capped out at $250,000 for the CPF, now if the voters decide to pass this law, that number would come up from $250,000 to $400,000 for both the CPF and this new fund. And we'll see what the fiscal impact of that is in a chart here in a moment.
So the net effect is basically under $1 million. There would be no change by this new legislation to what a person might pay, because currently they're paying at a rate of 2% with a lower exemption. The exemption gets raised, add the 0.5%. It doesn't change anything until you get above $1 million in purchase price.
In fact, it's actually a little bit even better news than that, meaning that anyone under $1 million would actually pay less than they currently would. So there's actually a cost savings for a buyer at $1 million and below. And that, because of the math involved here, exactly your point, Mr. Supervisor, that math sort of catches up when you get to $1 million. And from there, every $100,000 of cost would actually result in $500 worth of tax that would be paid above $1 million. So anybody below $1 million is actually going to come out slightly ahead here. So let's see. Looking at who does not pay, again, on the right-hand side, first-time home buyers, as we said, one of the big takeaway messages that I want to make sure everybody has in their mind, whether you support this program or not, just in terms of trying to make sure that everybody is playing with the same set of facts here as we all have a conversation, it's the buyer who pays, right? And I cannot say that enough. If somebody is coming into the community and they're buying a home, that is who is going to carry the burden of paying this tax. Okay. All right. So on the left-hand side of that same slide, benefits and payments, you see a list of all of the different aspects of the community that would actually benefit here. And I would actually argue that we all win. If we are able to make meaningful progress on addressing the affordable housing crisis in this community, I would argue that there's not a person in this town that doesn't benefit, whether that is as an employer, whether that's as a consumer, whether it's as a resident of a neighborhood, whether it's somebody who's just trying to buy goods and services or has a kid in a school or needs emergency medical service at some point. You will benefit as a result of this program. When we are able to have a more sustainable community, because we can actually have people live here that provide the core services that allow our community to function, we literally become a more sustainable community. That's socially true, it's economically true, it's morally true. Next slide, please. So how do we move forward from here? We have the, actually, I skipped a slide, my apologies. So this is actually the graph that shows exactly what the supervisor was talking about a moment ago. And I think the most salient point here, if you look at that purchase price column on the left-hand side and you drag your finger down to where it begins at 1 million, everything on the right-hand side of the page, those next two columns, is either a wash or is a reduced amount. And so what I mean by that is, take the example of $900,000. Somebody who is under the current plan paying the 2% CPF real estate transfer tax would actually be paying $13,000, assuming you're not a first-time home buyer, would be paying $13,000. Under the new plan, because of that floor or that exemption coming up from $250,000 to $400,000, you would actually be paying $500 less. And everything above that on the page, similarly so. Any price point below $1 million, that person is actually coming out a hair ahead. That tipping point is $15,000 at $1 million. That's kind of where that begins to tip the other way. And you can again see that all the way down to $2 million, somebody is, going to pay, at current rate, they're going to pay $35,000, and then under the new program, that's when they start, losing the exemption. That falls off the table, as it were, at $2 million. And you can see that, the folks who, have the ability to buy those homes would be paying into this program more aggressively at those higher price points. So at the bottom of the page there, because we know there are transactions in this town that happen at, for example, the $10 million number. The swing between the current rate would be $195,000. That same person under the new program would pay $250,000 into a split between the Community Preservation Fund and the new Affordable Housing Fund. So next slide, please, so this is process. Where do we go from here, and how does all of this actually happen? Well, in order for this program to be stood up and run, as I said, the voters would have to vote in approval on November 8th. You, as the town board, as part of your budget process, would need to take an educated guess about what the revenue for this program would be. You would need to make some decisions about how you would want that to be administered, and create a budget that would be part of the public, transparent conversation that happens at the end of every year, where people come in, they have a chance to ask questions questions, pull it apart, understand what do we anticipate revenue to be, what are the known expenses in terms of either staffing or overhead, how are we going to administer this program. As I like to tell the folks on my team, budgets are a blueprint. They're a roadmap for where we're going from here. And so you all would be challenged or charged rather with coming up with that budget. You would be basing that on the specific recommendations that are in the work plan that you have before you today. So from there, obviously the budget would be subject to public hearing. That would need to be reviewed and approved by all of you, as I said. And then once we get into January of next year, obviously assuming that the voters have elected to pass this, then specific projects, whether those are advanced by the town of East Hampton as a municipal entity, whether it's an individual coming forward and wanting to apply for one of the categories that we already discussed, whether it's a private enterprise that wants to apply for funding so they could build units, there would be a formal application process. And that again is described in here, where a formal application would be submitted to the town that would be shared amongst the relevant departments, whether it's the housing department, planning department, building department, if we need natural resources to provide review, very much like the type of review process that already happens for any type of development application. None of that goes away. There are no shortcuts here. Nobody gets to do something because they're creating affordable that looks different or, is administered differently than if this were any other standard project. So all of that environmental review, zoning review, that all still applies. So those applications would be made. Those applications would be fully reviewed by professional staff. If they need anything, for example, variances, planning board approval, all of that still goes through the transparent public processes that currently exist. The opportunities for public comment would still exist. There would be a record where people could come in and either support or oppose or offer guidance for how things could be improved. To the extent that it's necessary, we would have coordinated review with other agencies, layers of government, and then the town board ultimately. And I think this is very important for people to know here. The town board serves as the ultimate backstop for any decision to spend money out of this fund. So think of it as basically a two-step process. The project gets proposed, that has to go through all of the standard formal review processes that already exist. And then there's the funding part of it. And that funding part of it would need to land in front of all of you. Just as you currently decide about and sign off on all CPF purchases and have the opportunity to look at a map and ask questions and, kick it back for, more discussion or information if needed. There would be a very similar process that would transpire here. So there's basically an additional set of checks and balances where the public, even further into the process, has an opportunity to come in and share with you whatever their either support or concerns or guidance would be for all of you before a funding resolution would ultimately be passed. So in addition to all of that, as a broader check and balance on this program, there is an independent annual audit that is required. Again, very similar to what currently exists with the Community Preservation Fund, where they would be looking at both expenditures and procedural compliance for the administration of this fund. So there are checks and balances throughout the process here. In order for us to even go down this road, we have to have a public hearing on this plan. It has to be adopted by all of you. The voters get a say, and then every single project that comes in is subject to an application and has to go through those formal review processes. And then it has to be ultimately approved and funded by all of you. And then there's an independent annual audit on top of all of that. So, as we learned with CPF over the years, transparency is key to ongoing public support and faith in this program. I think, we have learned over time that when, we have that sunshine and we get that light of day onto the types of programs that we're advancing as the right work for the community to do, it gives people the peace of mind that they need to buy into and support these programs. And that model is exactly what would happen here with this new community housing fund. Mr. Supervisor, you look like you were going to say something.
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
Listening blissfully.
Fair enough. So at this point, I'm available to answer any questions for you. I didn't want to go too much into detail here because, as I said, there's 68 pages worth of material here that covers all manner of different things, and you didn't want that version of the presentation.
No.
Thank you, Jeremy, and I want to thank the other members of the committee who have worked with me to produce this plan. draft for the town board to review. Jeremy says 68 pages long. The latter half of the document really has a number of really interesting tables and appendices that, I think give context for what we're trying to do and why we need to do what we're planning to do. And to your earlier comments of who benefits and why it's important, that can't be overemphasized. As property values have increased exponentially in the last couple of years, especially, we're going to find that our community is basically unraveling, and that the people who are required to make a community run, whether they're municipal workers, hospital staff, volunteer firefighters, ambulance service, teachers, police officers, the gamut. If we can't have housing available for these folks, then we're going to be in a very sad situation. We have basically one road in, one road out, and the trade parade and commuting is really already at capacity. So we really need to forge ahead, find creative solutions to address this problem in a meaningful way. And I want to thank you and the committee members and the town board for being so supportive of this effort.
Thank you.
It really is all hands on housing.
I just want to add one thing, and this is something we talked about at the Community Housing Opportunity Fund Committee, and I would bring it up on my liaison report, but I think it's important to say it here, is that the wording of the referendum needs to be simple. It needs to be understood. It doesn't have to have these double negatives at some of these referendums. You're not sure what they're really talking about. And then they need a paragraph of explanation from the East Hampton Star or the East Hampton Press so that we kind of know what we're voting on when those things. So I think, I don't know who's doing the wording for that referendum, but I'm just cautioning that it needs to be
That
well
will be
understood.
the attorney's office, and Jen Nigro will be working on that.
So
She'll
Jen
be up
is
speaking
here.
next.
So I just-
And we've had that discussion. Jen is
Oh,
on,
good.
is on the Housing Fund Committee with myself and Jackie Lowy and John Yellen and Tom Rule and Jeremy and Eric. And so we've been discussing that
Okay, good.
at length. We understand the importance of that. And I think everybody will agree that we have to be able to convey what folks are voting on
Right.
in plain language that meets the legal requirements, but is plain, straightforward language so people understand what they're really voting for.
Yep.
So there's one thing that Jeremy, that you said that I disagree with. And I think what we should do, there's a 68-page document that the committee put together. And I think leading up to the public hearing and maybe beyond, we take 15 minutes at each work session and you dive into some of these charts that are in here so that the community has a better understanding. We say that the plan is on the website, but how many, folks are really going to go there and download it? But we do know a lot of folks watch LTV because we hear it all the time. And we have the press at our meetings, so they'll pick up on things. And I think the more information we put out there, the better off we'd be. So
Yeah, to your point, Kathy, I think, there's a lot of, there are a lot of tables and graphs and whatnot in the back portion, 20 some pages, I think. Some of those are really important in giving context. And then, we can certainly delve into, some of the details of implementation of the plan. This was really basically a rough overall outline due to time constraints. And we certainly encourage everyone to have a closer look. And we certainly can be talking about this at every work session going forward. And I think, after, and the other aspect of this is actually the plan does not have to be adopted prior to the referendum. It has to be adopted prior to any expenditures of the fund once established. But we felt that it was very important to make as much headway towards, presenting an initial plan. And keep in mind that with the CPF, the Management Stewardship Plan, is reviewed and updated. So this will be a living document going forward. So it's not set in stone as is forever. That is something that will continue to evolve to be able to address the needs of the community.
So, but pencil us in for every Tuesday. So we have a work session.
With pleasure. And I would just say that I completely agree with your point. I think, one thing that the supervisor and I have talked about is where 68 pages is great. That proves you've done the hard version, but now you got to do the really hard version, which is get that down into one page that people can digest and understand and feel like it speaks to them. I think if people, as we move through this conversation, aren't able to understand clearly what the benefits are, who would benefit from it, and where the money would come from, then we really haven't done a good job at basic communication around this. And I think that's the next several steps that we have to take. It's one thing to lay a big document on the table and say, please read it. I think we all know that people's lives just don't work in that way right now. And if we can't communicate in a more succinct way, then we're not actually going to reach them, and maybe we're not even going to get their support.
Yeah, for me, Jeremy, when we talk about sustainability, we talk about it generally in environmental terms. We must sustain the environment, sustain our coastal resiliency. But this project, and this is my one pager for me, is to sustain our community. Because what else, if we don't sustain our community, nothing else seems to matter worth saving. And I do believe we are now at in a crisis situation, and we're either going to sustain our community and have a living community in East Hampton, or we're simply going to be commodity. And that's, I believe this plan will help us sustain our community for the future.
So my quick comments are, thank you very much for putting this together with the supervisor, moving it forward. It shows the town board's commitment to our all hands on housing. Mm-hmm. Our approach right now is making generational change. And that's what I think this fund does. You also have to thank Governor Hochul and Assemblyman Thiel on this. Mm-hmm. If this was already instituted by the past governor and maybe move this forward, in 2021, our CPF, and with 0.5% with our real estate transfers, we would have had close to a little bit over $16 million for 2021. And the first third of this year, a little over $5 million from 0.5% tax would have been able to go to affordable housing in the town of East Hampton. So again, it's a generational moment for that fabric, for that state sustainability. And it comes to the voters of East Hampton if this is what you want. And we have a really good option right now in front of us to get that changed for the better. And I appreciate that. And I thank the supervisor for moving this forward.
Mr. Leese, you are, of course, 100% correct. That last year would have yielded just over $15 million. The year before that would have yielded over $10.5 million. The year before that would have been a hair under $6 million. So you're exactly right. And we are not going to, of course, solve any of the major issues facing this community with a single piece of legislation. But I think when you're talking about sums like we just described, we can make a meaningful difference in many, many people's lives in this community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Next up, staying with community housing, we have a discussion of Chapter 160 and 162 revisions. And we have Jennifer Nigro. Jen Nigro's here from Assistant Town Attorney from Attorney's Department. Good morning, Jen.
Good morning. So we have addressed some of the public comments we received, including typographical errors to our proposed amendments to Chapter 160 of the Community Housing Fund. We had a few changes. You'll notice a little bit of additional language to the definition of first-time homebuyer, added as here and as hereafter amended from time to time by the state legislature. That makes it easier for us to just incorporate any amendments that the state may make going forward without having to redo our whole statute. We plugged in 162 for our fund established, all revenues and real estate transfer tax authorized by Chapter 162, now that we know that that's going to be our real estate transfer tax code number. The other changes were toward the end to 160-7. We corrected the section of the tax law that I had the numbers inverted on, and an effective date in the mandatory referendum. And yes, following up on what we just discussed, a referendum first draft has been distributed to the committee. And yes, it does need to be shortened. But of course, like lawyers, we like to put it all in first. So that's the changes to 160. And again, that was to address some of the public comments that we had received during the public hearing. And I thank David Buda for pointing them out because we wouldn't want to catch them after November. Same thing for 162. I'm sorry, I should ask any questions on 160?
Questions, anyone?
Okay. Moving on to 162, this is the actual real estate transfer tax for community housing. We changed out some of the language, obviously, where it said preservation fund. We had housing opportunity swapped out. In addition, we had conveyances to first-time home buyers added to the exemptions, and that is as defined under Chapter 160 of the East Hampton Town Code. We do that, obviously, so we don't have competing definitions in different portions of the code, which is something we always try to avoid. And I think that is the gist of the changes to that at the end. Per also comment, same changes that we made to 160 is to add a provision that the effective date of this legislation must be expressly made contingent upon approval by mandatory referendum.
And Jen, these are all considered Scribner's errors, correct? So we don't, the public hearing.
From our perspective, yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt if you like to have another public hearing. That being said, I don't think you're making any real substantive changes, at least from our office's point of view, that would require a second public hearing. But again, that's up to the board.
I don't think we need a second public hearing
for some scribbling.
Any other questions or comments?
No.
For Jen?
Thank you, Jen.
Okay, Jen, and you're up for the next.
Affordable accessory apartments. Ready for that?
Yes, we
Okay,
are.
so this is a proposed amendment, and this follows last week's work session discussing whether to raise the cap on the number of affordable accessory apartments that can exist within each school district. Pretty universal across the board last week to agree to double from 20 to 40 for each school district for a maximum of 200 townwide, and to double the number from 4 to 8 of how many of those can be detached. And you see that in the green font changes and some strike throughs to the document that was distributed and posted on the website. Are there any questions about that?
No, I just have a comment that we took a look at this and are adopting the changes or proposing changes because East Hampton has already reached their cap, or the Hamlet of East Hampton, and there's a waiting list. So again, this is to facilitate any opportunity to create a housing affordability for the community.
And I'm just on piggybacking on what Kate just said. I've already received an email or a call in the last couple of weeks by an individual that wants to add another affordable accessory apartment on their house, but they can't because they're in East Hampton. So it's proper timing. And again, the way this is reasonable. And then also the fact is that there's going to be a cap that we can come back, or future boards can discuss this also then too. So thank you. Thank you for bringing it up.
I was away celebrating my 35th wedding anniversary last week, so I missed the work session. Was there any discussion? I haven't honestly had a chance to see the 3.5 hour meeting yet on tape. Was there a discussion about changing the restriction from 3/4 acre and up for accessory detached apartments to lower that to 1/2 acre?
So I did bring it up. It's something that I would like to look at. I know Sylvia and I are the ones that brought it down from 1 acre to 3/4 acre with the board support. I think it's something that we can bring the metrics in to see, and then bring it back to the board, but it's worth looking into again. And we can see how homes have been built, because again, when we initially did that, we still didn't get a flood of individuals that wanted to apply for the detached affordable accessory structure affordable apartment 3/4 acre. So we can see how many more properties, maybe at 1/2 acre or even less than 3/4 acre to 1/2 acre, might be available to apply then too. So we have that information, Sylvia and I.
I just know from from looking at that and the fact that we haven't had as many people take advantage as we might have thought. Many of the properties in East Hampton are half acre, and many of them have existing garages that could be converted to an accessory affordable apartment without adding a great deal of expense to the property owner. So I think it's something we should discuss further. I'm glad to understand that that was brought up. Some initial discussion around that has taken place.
There was discussion on that, and there was also some discussion based on my notes about 300 to 600 square feet. So
Going a little bit bigger than
maybe going a little bit
Right.
bigger. Obviously, it would depend on how big the square.
So
is.
600 square feet, you get to a different flow rate in the county health.
Right.
So that's.
And I know that in some cases, if you have an existing home and say the parents want to make an affordable apartment for their adult children, that might often be in the basement portion of the house. So it becomes, like a duplex. But if the foundation size of the house is greater than 600 square feet, then they run into problems with getting permits for that affordable housing, where it doesn't increase the footprint and there's no change really in density. 600 feet versus 900 square feet. We should take a look at maybe that as well, so that we can assess the impacts would be of changing the size for that particular situation.
And if I could just add on one more, it's that I'm sitting here and this discussion's going is, I believe we're only allowed to have one bedroom in a 600 square foot.
Yeah.
Correct.
Now, sometimes you might have a mother and father with a young child, and you need to have two bedrooms. So I'm wondering, would we be allowed to have two bedrooms if the septic system would allow for in an affordable accessory structure? That's something to also look into, because it allows for that family to grow naturally, if you want to say.
So, yeah, I think these are all good points and things that we'll continue to look at.
So are we suggesting that we go to public hearing with this now
Yes.
and then come back and
Yes.
revise it again later in the year?
Yeah, I feel good with that because there's a need. There's a waiting list right now for this.
Yeah.
So
So we have Tom Rule here, our Director of Housing and Community Development. Tom, I see you raising your hand. You want to make a comment?
Yeah, I think the other CHOF committee.
Just come on up to the podium.
The other CHOF committee, which is the housing committee they are talking about looking into discussing apartments and single family residences and some ideas. I think the hope is that we get the cap raised now, but the committee will look at making recommendations for try to incentivize these down the road further and some of those issues that you've raised now. We just want to get the cap done
Sure.
now and then
Understood.
hopefully keep moving.
Okay, so we'll move forward to raise the cap, and then we'll continue to visit those other items in discussion for future public hearing.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Jen. That brings us up to liaison reports already.
Wow.
goodness, we're flying.
That's,
We want to see if there are any more public comments, or are we done with that?
Jace, do we have any callers on the line?
We have no callers on the line.
Anybody here wish to make a comment? Okay, we'll move on then. Jose, yeah, please, come on up. You might as well. I mean, you've sat through the whole meeting.
Well, I feel like I'm representing the whole public here today. I seem to be the only one.
You essentially are, Jose.
I am. And I'm glad I stayed. I wasn't planning on staying beyond my initial comments, but I'm glad I did because the affordable housing is a very important issue, not only for the community as a whole, but in my particular case, because I'm in real estate. And I work with a lot of people who have great needs and unaffordable housing options here. So the idea of having additional affordable housing, whether they be rental or purchase, is going to be a huge asset to the community. Way beyond the trade parade, we have a lot of folks here, and most people, when they think about affordable housing, they're not thinking the police, they're not thinking the teachers, they're not thinking the emergency ambulance services. Unfortunately, they're thinking of the people who are working in our gardens and people who may or may not have all the paperwork appropriate for them. So there's a holdback of people that I believe would support affordable housing if they might have a better understanding of what the affordable housing really is. And I think a key threshold for that would be, what is the income level for affordable housing? When I looked it up, I was amazed at how high it is. People think of affordable housing, they think of people who really can't afford the neighborhood. Forget about the housing itself, but the neighborhood. And that's just not the case. So I really do love the idea of the single pages, the whittling down of the information so that the community, the voters, and yourselves, myself, can even understand what it means. Those double negatives drive me nuts. It's like explain and re-explain and re-explain. But what you guys were talking about with the people, I'm sorry, I don't know all their names, but the people who just presented here, I thought was terrific. And I will certainly be coming back to these Tuesday work sessions so I can continue to support and understand and hear about it. But I think that two things that I wrote down, if I may, for information. The first one being, what is that income level for affordable housing? I think that's key, maybe much more key than we all realize, so that the general public understands who the neighbor is going to be. That makes an issue, an impact. And the second being the size of the units. So I was thrilled beyond my wildest imagination to hear this today, that there's the possibility of increasing the size of the unit and also lowering the acreage size of what type of parcel could hold a standalone accessory unit. So those two things are very, very important. The 1 acre to the 3/4 acre, I understand how it didn't make a big difference because there aren't that many. But when you hit that half-acre threshold, you're going to have a lot more people who would be interested in making those applications. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Jose. Appreciate your comments.
Mr. Supervisor, we have a brand new caller on the line because I threw up to make sure that everything was fair. And
right.
May I unmute them? Thank you.
Let's go right to it then.
Okay, give me a second. Caller.
Hi.
Hey, Michael Daly. How are you?
Hi, good morning. It's Michael Daly from East End Yimby, and it's good to be with you. And it's always encouraging to listen to this town board and the department heads speak as clearly and as passionately about community housing as you do. I just wanted to make a quick comment about accessory units. And while we applaud what appears to be an incremental improvement, if you will, or relaxation of the accessory apartment legislation that's in place, this is really just the beginning. And a few things that we've observed is that municipalities that are having a greater impact on creating accessory apartments have moved their permissible size to as much as 50% of the primary structure as being allowable, which also speaks to what you were saying, Supervisor, that if somebody wants to create a lower level or an upper level as an accessory, and it's half the size of the house, that should be permitted. Also reducing the lot size to as low as possible. If that takes you a couple of turns at this, from the acre to the 3/4 acre, to the half acre, and then eventually to the 1/4 acre, we believe that you'll see more success with that. Because a lot of people who are truly in need of accessory apartments don't live in these big estates, but live in small homes that are in our community and have children that perhaps they can't expand the house, or that's where the need really comes in our denser lower land lot sizes that are closer to businesses and business districts and things like that. That's where accessories will be really a great value. But it's so encouraging to listen and to watch this happen, even if part of it is incremental. And I'm sure that a lot of the unpermitted accessories that are out there now hopefully will see this opportunity and go to permit their structures as it becomes more permissible. So congratulations and keep up the good fight.
Thanks for calling, Michael. Any other comments?
Yes, we have one more caller on the line. Hello, caller ending 8764. You're on the air.
Hi, good afternoon, or still good morning, 11:59. It's Dave Buddha. I just wanted to make a quick response. I haven't had a chance to digest all of the documents that were posted on the website for today's meeting, so I'm not sure if all of the changes that Ms. Nigro was made were just Scrivener's corrections or not. Let me just turn off this, turn off my screen. Am I still with you?
100%.
Yes, you are, David.
Okay, sorry about that. The last caller disturbed me because he obviously doesn't know anything about the existing town zoning. We don't have any quarter-acre zoning. So someone who speaks in terms of moving the needle so far to the left, let's say, that we would be encouraging and allowing the creation of accessory apartments in quarter-acre zones. We don't have quarter-acre zoning. Minimum zoning lot size for single-family residential detached zoning is 20,000 square feet. We're not looking to change the entire character of this neighborhood, of this community, and we shouldn't be. I'm a strong supporter of the legislation for an extra 0.5% of supplemental transfer tax, perhaps a little less in favor of the continuation of the full 2% for the Community Preservation Fund. I think that the public needs to start thinking about whether it's appropriate in view of the vast sums being generated by that 2% fund and how it's being spent recently, and whether all of those expenditures have been worthy and appropriate. It may be time to start thinking about, at the same time we create a 0.5% supplemental transfer fund, we might want to consider at the same time having a referendum to reduce the 2% Community Preservation Fund to 1.5% or 1%. Let me just throw that out there. I said it. I'm sure you're all going to be squirming in your seats. I can't see the screen right now. But it really is something that we need to talk about, whether we have too much of a good thing in terms of CPF monies and whether we would be better off trimming that down to a number that is more manageable and doesn't tend to lead to what I believe are some inappropriate and ineffective and inefficient expenditures. Okay, thank you very much. That's my thoughts for today.
Thank you, David. Anyone else from the public wish to address the board?
And we have no other callers on the line.
We'll move on to liaison reports. Thank you.
Great. So somebody that's involved with the Neopolitical Cowgirls and the January Girls reached out to me. If you recall, I guess it was last winter, 2021, those organizations came to us and asked if we could put a little free food pantry on town property. And we identified the senior center because it was centrally located. Peter, you and I were there at the ribbon cutting. Well, they've asked if they could set up like a small food drive this Saturday, a couple of volunteers put a table in the parking lot, and because they really need to replenish these little pantries and they want to have food, because everybody, doesn't realize that, even in the summer, there are folks that are food insecure. And so I have a resolution on for Thursday just to give them permission to be able to set up a little mini food drive at the senior
Where's
center.
it going to be? At the senior center?
Yeah, well, it's going to be in the parking lot of the senior center.
Okay.
That's where the
Same location.
event is. Diane Patrizio's on board. It's from 12 to 2. It doesn't conflict with the 12-step programs that use the space on Saturday. So I think it's really a win-win for everyone. Earlier this month, the East Hampton Sag Harbor CAC met. We met here in the main meeting room. It was the first time we'd been in person. So that was great. And I, having been just started being the liaison in January, some of the folks I had never met in person before. So it was exciting to all be together. And we discussed some of this was old business, things that we've discussed in the past, the safety at the intersections of, Cedar Street and Old Northwest and Stephen Hans Path and looking at re-engineering that. We talked about the rental registry and excessive turnover in our community, affordable community housing. They're very supportive of upping the cap on the, accessory apartments. They also suggested that we look at the size of the properties and look at reducing the size to allow for the units. And a couple of the members had gone to the community engagement for the new senior center, and they talked about the process and the engineering firm and how excited they were and how that's moving forward. Our next meeting had to be rescheduled because of the 4th of July. We're going to be meeting on Monday, July 11th. This room is already being used by the trustees. So we're hoping for good weather, and we're going to meet at the picnic table. Now, I saw your property management committee met there yesterday.
And I'll report on that in my liaison report, but
we'll
it's
just,
a non-meeting.
Take off the pollen, with a paper towel, no leaf blowers, and have our meeting.
Gas blowers.
No gas blowers, but have our meeting out there. The Route 114 Community Housing Working Group met last week, and I have to say there's a tremendous amount of experience in the room. We had Ed Reale from the Sag Harbor Community Trust. We had Katie Casey and Amato Ortiz from East Hampton Housing Authority. Jeremy and Eric from Planning was there. Tom Rule, of course. And we really kind of got into the nitty-gritty. Talked about modular construction, talked about basements versus crawl spaces versus cement slabs, where the sanitary would go, what are our next steps? Right now, we're meeting every other week because we really need to start to build momentum. We have surveys for those properties. I reached out to Land Acquisition and Management. They're going to walk the property and survey the trees and drop GPS points on them, all pretty technical, so that we can make sure that, if there's, beautiful trees on the property, we want to work around them or move them if need be. So, and then we're talking about going out for RFP for an architect. And, as Amato had said, the more information you put in that RFP, the more cost effective the proposals will come back, because a lot of the information has already been thought through. So that's moving ahead, and I'm excited with the team we have there. Switching gears, special events. As we know, usually the middle of July is the Wounded Warrior Soldier Ride. That's now scheduled for Saturday, July 16th. That's going to be on resolution for Thursday. The numbers have been lower than, over the last few years. So rather than use 555 to stage their event, the Amagansett Fire Department, offered to host the event. So they're going to be on the property of the fire department for registration. That's where the race will start and end, and the big picnic and barbecue afterwards. They have asked, though, in case they need overflow parking, they'd like to use 555 for that. So I need to reach out, David, just to make sure that the property is mowed. It's on the schedule for prior to July 16th.
Sure.
I also circulated this morning some revisions we want to make to special event fees. A few months back, we updated Chapter 151 of the special events permits, and we have a rush fee in there. In the past, we've only charged a rush fee for catered events, because a lot of times on the beaches, for under 50 people, somebody will decide the weather looks good for the weekend. They want to have a clam bake. But now we're getting, weddings that have to be planned, a year to 18 months in advance, come in 3 weeks before the wedding, or some of these big events. You'll see it on social media. And then, we're up against the clock when they put their application in. So we want to update the rush fees. So that's what'll be on for the.
I had
for
a
Thursday
question. I
as
was
well.
looking at that list, and there's still a deposit required for litter.
Yeah, and that's really at the discretion of the town clerk. But yes, there is.
So I was just recalling that I guess some of the deposits were being changed. Was that for events and different events?
Well, what we ask for is we ask for those, separate checks, but we haven't updated the fee for cleanup deposits.
So they're still being required based on the discretion of the clerk for the committee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. And what we find with the caterers, for the caterers that are, are based here, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll put in one check at the beginning of the season, and the clerk's office will hold that.
But we are encouraging folks to carry in, carry out.
Yeah, well, that got changed in the legislation where, if you're having an event, let's say at the Maidstone Pavilion, you can't leave your litter in bags next to the garbage pails there. You need to take it away with you. As Kate said, carry in, carry out. And that was built into this last version of Chapter 151. That's all I got.
Thank you, Kathy. David?
Yes, thank you. The Nature Preserve Committee met last week. Part of our maintenance reports are they installed blueberry boxes with assistance of Frank from South Fork. Help me, Natural History Museum on the Buckskill Meadows Preserve, and they actually had bluebirds spotted in them already, which is great. At the Nancy Kelly Preserve, which is off Springs Fireplace Road, we're still monitoring the bamboo removal that we did there. Shoots are coming up. We're doing mowing on them. And we're doing the test area, I think we all remember, where we're tarping over to try to take away the photosynthesis of the bamboo. We cut that back, and now the growth has been less. And we thought heat was originally allowing it for everything to grow fast, and it was. Now the photosynthesis is not allowing it to grow. Please remember that there's not many municipalities, organizations that have tried to undergo such a bamboo type of remediation project that we're trying here.
So while you're on the topic of bamboo, it just triggered a memory.
Yeah. Okay.
I was recently at the Memorial Day dedication of the Colonial Cemetery on Jericho Road. They have, I think, 7 different
the back corner
folks that have served there. And in the back corner that there is bamboo invading into the Colonial Cemetery. And I know since you're involved with the nature preserves and bamboo and cemeteries, I thought I'd mention it while
Sounds good. Yeah, I saw that. I was there like last year to look into it. That's actually a cemetery I'm interested in seeing if we can write a grant for also with working with.
So there's, we'll talk later, but there's a property owner that may be willing to donate additional property to the cemetery.
Oh, spectacular. Okay, great. So bamboo. Yes, thank you very much. Well, I'll get that cut down. Also 81 Ocean Avenue, which is right by the main beach parking lot, that restoration, habitat and wetland buffer project has started, just to let everyone know. That was in coordination with land management, and they've started the removal on there. So it is amount of work that's happening over there, and that is starting to move. We also didn't really discuss much, but there's emails going back and forth. And I know there's been some publications recently about a beech tree disease that we're starting to see in East Hampton. And primarily on that, the DEC is monitoring it. We don't have an active plan on anything right now, but if you see beech trees, please contact land management. We want to keep monitoring it. You can see it already on one of my favorite drives, which is Old Stone Highway. You're going up by the by the Bell Estate already right now, and we're starting to hear about some other areas too. It's unfortunate. We discussed the old Avalon property in Montauk, which is on the Circle. I think it's called the Circle, the Loop. Thank you, sir. Off of Second House Road, about development management plan for that property. Not the restoration, but the removal of the house has actually ended up having a very beautiful property there. So we want to put together a management plan for that. Staying in Montauk for a couple of ones. Also, a skate park update. The skate park is actually moving along at a very nice pace right now. They're continuing to pour concrete in the snake runs and in the float bowl, and it's coming out really, really nice. And they're going to be moving on to onto the flats, which is more the street course right now, and they're forming that up. And all of the vegetation, invasive vegetation that was taken down on the hill, grass is coming in right now. And we're getting a lot of positive remarks from some of the families that are out there for softball or baseball and stuff. So thank you for that. That's moving on. We're hoping maybe by August then too on that project. So, but if you're out there, put your eyes on it then too. It's fun to watch. But we can build a house. I think a lot of us are very comfortable building a house, but it's art.
Yeah,
It's a freeform art.
I was talking to some of the folks out there, the foreman, who's very passionate about skateboarding. So it's great to have somebody involved with the activities actually working on the construction design.
The construction the groups have been great, and it's fun to watch that aspect of it, because I don't think we'll see another I know I won't built like this. It's just fun to watch that construction.
Is anybody videotaping the progress?
Yeah, so we have drone video. Capital management is taking care of that. Severo and Kevin Ahern then too. And then the Montauk Skatepark Coalition has been really moving on it. Also taking a lot of pictures. Update on the Star Island commercial docks update, which we've already had our accepted bid for right now. We had Ed Michaels had a meeting with all the commercial dock lease owners out there to let them know the update of the project right now, and specifically that the majority, actually all the gear in that area are going to have to be removed at some point, and we're coming up with a plan for the removal of that gear. We might be bringing it over to sanitation in East Hampton, where we've done it in the past, particularly the lobster pots and some of the crab pots that are in there temporarily. So that we can have enough staging area for the equipment that's coming in there, the large equipment. But that's been discussed in the SLIPS committee, FAC committee, and then also now as an on-site meeting.
Is there space over there to? I know we're having some other space issues.
In Springs, there is the recycling center. Steve Lynch has been in contact with them also then too.
All right.
And this is just temporary for them too. I'll keep staying in Montauk. We had a tremendous amount of vandalism at the Ditch Plains Comfort Station this weekend. It happened on Saturday night. I was actually there at 7:00 on Saturday night because we did the floors out there, and we did in the men's bathrooms. And I was going to actually a benefit for that they had for the skate park. And first thing that morning is that there's about $4,000 in damage that was done out there. Everything's been knocked off, all the doors and partitions. So I have requested new closing procedures for our beach bathrooms. We did this also during COVID, in which we closed them at dusk, 9, 10 o'clock, reopen them in the early morning. I will bring that to the board also, but that might be one of the options we want to do, because we're constantly getting vandalism now still at some of our further reach beaches, Maidstone Park's one, in these areas too.
So then
That's very discouraging.
Who would close them at dusk?
So I have asked for that the departments to get that to me. Last year, I believe it was being closed by either by the last custodial shift or Marine Patrol, and then open first thing in the morning by the first Marine Patrol or custodial. So that's what we want. We don't want to close them too early because there are special events on the beaches. So they're going to work that through, and I'll make sure I get that to the board. But it's the definition of insanity. I know it's the same thing over and over.
Very discouraging.
And it's discouraging, particularly when you put more work into it to help people.
Well,
But it's also, it's not just the vandalism, it's the repair. It takes long, and it affects so many people then that are going to the beach, and the families that are going to the beach, and the kids, and
we just couldn't get to it on that Sunday morning. So again, if you had youngsters wanting to go to the bathroom in there,
it's just really
didn't work.
sad.
Is it both the men's and the ladies' room?
No,
You sent me pictures that looked like it was just the
It
men's.
was just the men's bathroom that was there. And there also was theft there last year. Don't forget, of the vendor, the beach vendor, twice were broken into. Right. So it's something that's officially happening, and I think we have to take a deeper look into it. Moving on to better stuff. than that. The 395 Panago group did meet last week after we had our Tuesday discussion. You'll see a resolution on today for hiring of a surveyor for the mapping of that project, looking into the options that we had discussed about softening some of the angles of the approaches on there then too. So you'll see that on there. I thought it was a reasonable pricing. Recreation, Parks and Recreation, we're still hiring summer staff and lifeguards. If anyone's interested, please contact the recreational department at 631-324-4141 for summer staff and lifeguarding positions. In recreation also then too, Little Leagues are into their Little League playoffs this year. And I want to thank Tony Littman for getting the fields prepped and repaired. My daughter has a big game tonight in Montauk.
She's in the playoffs,
Go Bree. Thrilled, charged every morning. Not really.
John's afterwards.
You go to Montauk, you got to go to John's. You just have to for the Little League special. It's true. It's great. Sorry. I also want to thank PSE&G, Vincent Frigeria. He's a government affairs for PSE&G. They had Second House Road. They're putting in a new 14,000 kV line in there, and they had to shut down part of the street there this Saturday. The reason why they did it on a Saturday, not the weekdays, because the school requested to do the weekends. That could have hamstrung some of the businesses out there, but their crews worked with the businesses out there to make sure they're open. Some had weddings, some did not. And there was an open line of communication, and I thank PSE&G for that. Today is the last day of school at East Hampton High School. There will be testing and graduations upcoming then too. And I just want to say thank you to the teachers and thank you to, again, this class of 2022 for making it through during COVID. It's difficult enough just to get through high school and everything, but to make it through during the period of COVID. Well done to East Hampton High. You see some of the places where they're going off to. It looks like our future is pretty bright out here. So thank you to them, and I wish all the graduates the best upcoming then too. And that's my liaison report.
Thank you, David. Sylvia?
Sure. I'm going to start with the business committee. We met last Wednesday, and we had Robert Ross, who's from the Southampton Hospital on, and he gave us the numbers again for Southampton, Stony Brook, and Eastern Long Island. Southampton Hospital on June 8th had 10 COVID patients, and that Saturday they'd only had 1. So they did see the rate go up. None of them are in ICU, which is also a good thing. Stony Brook Hospital had 39. Last week they had over 60, and Eastern Long Island on June 8th had 2. Testing on June 4th and 5th at the hospital, June 4th was a 5.1% positivity, and on June 5th, 7.7% positivity. So they are giving vaccinations every Wednesday, and you need to call for testing, for PCR testing.
So can I just add one quick personal note? So my brother-in-law's father died of COVID on Sunday. He was never vaccinated, his choice, but he died on Sunday. And so it's still out there, everyone. And it was the first time it got towards my family in that results. But there's assistance for it if you would like it, and it helps.
Yes, we do get, and I didn't write it down for this, that when they do the vaccinations at Southampton Hospital, they still have folks, a minority coming in for their first time vaccination. Sure. So, David, thank you for reminding folks that, this is still out there and it can affect everyone in your family. So please. So we did discuss, I'm still at the business committee, we discussed the new administration bureau for certain code violations. They want to know, we went through some of the code violations such as gas leaf blowers, open container, no peddler's permit, beach driving, those kinds of things are going to be under the Administration Bureau, and noise. And noise is the one that they were, affects the businesses, but they understood how this was going to work. And I just want to make one clarifying situation. And this is Kate, David McMaster, Assistant Town Attorney Ed Michaels, and I have been the ones interviewing the folks that are going to set up this bureau. In the resolution that we move forward with, it says full-time position. It is the meaning of that was not that this is a full-time position. It was going to be a full-time workload when you start, and then it's really a part-time position. And so there has been some confusion. Even some of the folks that we've interviewed said, well, what does this mean? It's full-time. I do
don't
this
want
and this.
full-time.
Right. I don't want full-time. So I just want to clarify that out loud, because I am hearing back that some folks are confused. So we are, so we did discuss that in the business community, that it is not a zoning and building code violations that will be heard through the Administration Bureau. We discussed the airport. We went over the presentation from last Tuesday by Cooley. Very few questions, just wanted to understand it. And I think going over that report again was informational for them. They also asked about the Affordable Housing Committee. I directed them to hopefully show up or either by Zoom or, listening to this, through LTV. Jeremy Samuelson gave an update on outdoor dining applications. We did have a discussion on string lighting. So there seems to be a string light that might be compliant with our code. And so we need to go back, if that is true, and the planning department is going to look at it to see if it can be dark skies compliant. Then we would need to go back and adjust our code so that they could use these, and they would come in. It would be part of the outdoor dining program or the administrative lighting permit that they would have to get. The Anti-Bias Task Force also met, and I just want to say a big thank you to Louise Bergerson, who is a member of the Anti-Bias Task Force. She started a program 8 years ago as a small group helping Spanish-speaking adults learn English. And she started it out at the Living Waters Church over on Industrial Road. It is now a 501c3 entity, and she's very proud of just getting that. They will now be working at night at the East Hampton High School. They have now enough for 8 to 10 classrooms of folks coming in, learning English, and the high school students will be able to get their community service by working with her on this program. So if you're interested in being a teacher for this program, you don't have to speak Spanish in order to be a teacher to help with this whole group. You can call my office and I'll get you connected with Louise, so that if you feel like this is something you want to do in helping your community, that would be great, and your fellow citizens, because they're all folks that are living and working here. My office number 631-324-2620. We also are having a table. The Anti-Bias Task Force has a table at the Juneteenth celebration at Herrick Park. It again is 2 to 4 on Sunday. We'll have brochures and our beautiful bumper stickers, and members of the Anti-Bias Task Force will be there to, answer questions and hand these things out. A Community Housing Opportunity Fund also met this past week. We discussed the upcoming plan that we heard today, and they were all very interested in how this 0.5% tax was going to look like. So, and again, I'll talk about the language of the referendum is important. It was a big discussion that we had at that meeting. So we hope that is clear and understandable by everybody. Again, they talked about the future of just the CHOF committee itself, because I think that will really be taken over. That name will be taken over. But the feeling is that this committee still needs to bring other issues, and we talked about it. Tom even talked about it a little bit today when he was here, that they need to bring other issues and move those forward, such as, should we reduce the size of the properties? Should they, you need that backing by a committee, I think, advising the town board on what they're hearing. They've been involved with community housing and affordable housing for a very long time. A lot of the folks are still on that committee that wrote the update in 2014 and again in 2018. So I think they've got a valuable background that we need to continue to have this committee. Related issues for affordable housing. We're also talking about the South Fork Community Connector. We think that is intertwined in, affordability out here and employees out here. So which also then is intertwined with business out here. So all of these things, I think, need to have this committee continue as part of the fabric of what our government does and the advice that we need to get. Moving on to Arts Council. They are doing their creative networking nights starting again in October. They're going to take a hiatus for the summer for July and August. And creative networking nights is a program that spotlights different members of our community who are either artists, writers, poets, musicians, and they present to an audience. It's a fun night where you can have light refreshments, and then you can also hear from fellow artists. And they've had as many as 50 folks show up for these events. And as few as maybe 10 or 15, but it's really always been a fun event to learn about your local community artists that are in the community, in our community. They gave a brief update on Brooks Parks, which is actually they're having their meeting today, that Brooks Parks committee, which is a separate committee from the town. But they did want to say that the Preservation League of New York, under what they call 7 to Save, they pick 7 properties everywhere in New York, from upstate New York to New York City to Long Island. And Brooks Park is listed as one of the 7 to Save for 22-23. This goes along with the Trust for Historic Preservation 2022 listed the 11 most endangered, and Brooks Park made that list as well. And Preservation Long Island had it on their list in 2021 as an endangered historic structure. So just reminding the town board as we move forward. Just want to announce that the Montauk Artists Association has refurbished their building, and they will open the Montauk Gallery at the Depot this Saturday at a reception between 5 and 7. That's the 18th.
Sorry, Sylvia, what was that? What was the Depot at the train station?
At the train station.
What was it for?
For the Montauk Artists Association.
Great. When was that?
Saturday, 5 to 7.
Thank you.
Yep. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. Okay.
Yes, I have a brief liaison report. First, South Fork Wind construction continues along the railroad right-of-way as part of the permit plan, and also on the substation on Cove Hollow Road. Board members should have received an invitation from Samantha Klein and Natural Resources, or a request for an invitation to present the Coastal Assessment and Resiliency Plan at the CACs. The education portion of the plan is getting underway, and we'd like to present to each of the CACs, as well as do a few public forums, perhaps one to be filmed at LTV that can be replayed on the aspects of the plan. I just would like to also, we briefly have been mentioning that our seasonal ban on gas-powered leaf blowers is in effect and will be in effect through September 20th. And this impacts homeowners and landscapers. There is a complete ban on gas-powered leaf blowers. Electric leaf blowers are able to be used Monday through Saturday. However, on Sundays, no type of leaf blowers are permitted to be used. There is a $1,000 penalty for first offense, and I just want to keep everybody aware of that ban. Also, the application period for water quality project grants is open through August 1st for water quality improvement projects, which are eligible for funding with the portion of the Community Preservation Fund. The portion of that fund, as you all know, is earmarked for water quality projects, which is extremely important for our town. For more information on that water quality application period, you just please go to ehamptonny.gov on the front page for more information. Also, then I would like to let the community know that the Springs Historical Society and Community Library is hosting another, and I'm going to start to call them infamous, Meet the Author Nights. This one is Wednesday, tomorrow at 6 at Ashwell Hall at 6 p.m. Admission is free. And this month's author, again, is a local Helen Harrison. She will be reading from her book, An Accidental Corpse, which is a mystery, which opens, the book opens, opening chapter begins on August 11th, 1956 in Springs. It'll be a great read, and this is her third mystery in her series. And also, once again, the blacksmith shop, the Parsons Blacksmith Shop in the heart of Springs near Ashwell Hall is open for demonstrations and a history lesson on smithing and the impacts here in our town. That'll be open from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And as I found out going there, there's quite a bit of history. Charles Parsons was a very interesting innovator and inventor, besides being a blacksmith. And blacksmithing here in East Hampton not only encompassed shoeing horses and wheels for wagons, but also anchors for the fishing community, along with a plethora of other metal uses. It's worth the forge is fired up, and there's a great demonstration going on there on Saturdays. And that is my report.
So I just want to add, I'm a big fan of Helen Harrison's books, and part of the reason is that they're fun, but they also have, she's incorporated local names, so and local places that may not even still be here, but I can remember, or others can remember it as well. So just to be able to romp through East Hampton is a fun adventure. I highly recommend her books.
That reminds me, Jeannie Henderson's book, Day Like Any Other. I think
it's another
book set here locally, surrounding the Great Hurricane of 1938. But you can almost know the characters of modern day because there are so many similarities. Thank you, Sylvia. So the PSEG, I met with some of their senior staff yesterday to discuss the 5-year plan. Every so often they update the 5-year plan. This is a plan that has to be approved by the LIPA board, but they go and take this plan to various municipalities, let them know. And they came to East Hampton, let us know what they're planning for East Hampton upgrades to the system. There is increasing demand and has been on the South Fork for some time. The offshore wind farm will be coming online in the next couple of years and supplementing the load demand. But there are also other improvements that need to be made. David mentioned that Second House Road, just went to 14 kV. Almost all the work they have planned for East Hampton in the next 5 years has to do with upgrades within the existing footprints of their substations, transitioning from 23 kilovolts to 33 kilovolts. So increasing the capacity there. There is a 69 kilovolt underground cable that's planned to go between the Buell Lane substation and the Bridgehampton substation, and that permitting and public hearing process is underway. I believe there's a public hearing on that on June 26th, and I think it's in Southampton. There wasn't any new overheads planned. So again, just within the existing substation footprints, and we don't expect that to have any impact on aesthetics or anything else, but we'll ensure that we have a reliable source of energy for the next coming years. Last night was the Amagansett Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. Kim Shah, our Director of Natural Resources, gave a status update on the LED street lighting upgrades. We have about 729 street lights within the town that the town's responsible for. Our plan is to, in our partnership with NYPA, New York Power Authority, and outside consultants, to upgrade all of that lighting to LED. And it's also bringing up an opportunity for us to review the effectiveness of the lighting at various locations, whether or not the lighting in certain locations is even necessary. If we can discontinue certain street lights, we certainly know that there are some places where they need to be supplemented. The Amagansett Citizens Advisory Committee is excited about the possibility of adding lampposts, historic natured lampposts, LED along the commercial historic district area, particularly, both improving the aesthetics and the safety. Currently, there are Cobra headlights that are not appropriately spaced, and they're also well up within the deciduous trees. And so you have this effect of light and shadow repeated. And of course, as people's eyes are adjusting to light and then shadow, that means that the safety is reduced there. So we will be improving the street lighting throughout the town. We just received from the outside consultants the draft, which is a significant document, has I think it's 69 pages or more of photometrics in various locations. They studied the entirety of the town street lighting. And so we'll have some choices and just further discussion after the department has an opportunity to fully digest what's been presented, and we'll have a town board presentation, bring everybody up to date on progress there. The estimate of cost is actually a bit lower than originally expected, which is also good news. Just a brief update on Montauk wastewater. We continue to work with our outside consultant, H2M, to review potential locations for a treatment site. And of course, the initial plan is to address the Montauk downtown wastewater needs. But there are other areas within Montauk that are also identified as needing community wastewater treatment, such as the docks, the transportation area over by the manor, and also Ditch Plains. So the recommendation from consultant is to find a site large enough to be able to accommodate additional locations within Montauk that are in need over time. We prioritized the downtown, but I think the docks will be a necessary, next location. Both, all of these areas are constrained physically for on-site upgrades, like we're doing in the residential portions of town, and therefore community treatments necessary. So that search and review of possible sites is ongoing. There is a site east of the landfill, which is promising, right next to the Montauk landfill and where the Tower Farm is, which could possibly accommodate the siting. As the board knows, trying to find available land for any project, whether it's a cell tower, affordable housing, what have you, is quite limited. So we've ruled out a number of potential sites due to not meeting Suffolk County Department of Health requirements and setbacks. So it's a pretty short list of possible locations, some of which may require a parks alienation or a land swap. So we're continuing with that. Also, the consultant is preparing to update the application to the Environmental Facilities Corporation for grant funding for wastewater treatment. We had applied previously and rejected because we weren't far enough along, and we're much further along now with that work. So we may be successful in this coming round. And again, the next step is once a site's located, then the consultant can develop the map and plan, which basically maps out both the geographical parameters of the wastewater district, as well as the plan for how you would treat the wastewater. Today is Flag Day. So if you have a flag, you might want to put it out. Celebrate Flag Day. We did have a meeting of Town Property Management Committee yesterday. There was a conflict with this room where we normally meet. So we deferred to that group and decided to meet outside on our beautiful campus here underneath the cherry trees, picnic tables, which was quite lovely given the weather. And unfortunately, we did not have the connectivity to be able to zoom in, and more than half of the members of the committee decided to zoom in. So we were only left with, I think, 6 of us outside, with the rest not able to connect, which is a little frustrating, but gave us an opportunity to enjoy our beautiful campus. We've changed our landscape maintenance here at Town Hall. We never use any pesticides, herbicides, or fertilizer here. And we've made an intentional effort to not cut close for a number of reasons. It allows the fescue to get deeper roots, not require as much irrigation or any irrigation in our case. But it also allows some of the natural wildflowers, whatever, to come up. We have an extraordinarily beautiful crop of clover right now.
Yes, you do.
And
Flowers are beautiful.
clover is
So
completely
do I
blanket,
at home.
totally blanketing the lawn areas. And we've noticed a real increase in the number of honeybees now. They've found the forage, and so the apiaries will be reaping the benefit of that town hall honey. We had hoped this year to have some hives installed on the town hall property. We got off to a little bit of a late start, given the governmental procurement process. We've kind of missed the season this year. We'll have to be planning a little further ahead for next year. But we also expect to have the wildflower meadow plowed and planted in the coming week. I think now we had to do a little bit of research and call 811, mark out, make sure that there weren't any utilities that we were unaware of. And I'm glad to report that our map
Was accurate.
was up to date with what they discovered, which was nothing in that particular area. So
Good.
hopefully they got it right and we got it right. Let's see. That brings me up to I started out with ACAC last night, the Amaga's Advisory Committee. Kim Shaw gave the presentation. There were also some questions from committee members about the parking situation and lighting at Ocean Dunes on Bluff Road near Indian Wells.
Mhm.
There's a significant amount of town public right-of-way
Right.
that is actually sort of attached to their parking lot. Apparently, they've also put in like concrete barriers that have lights on them. I'm not sure if that's gone through site plan, and it sounded like they were actually within the town's right of way. So there was some interest in doing a little research about that. They also have been putting up no parking signs, and it is public land, so I don't think that's enforceable, but it discourages members of the public who might otherwise be able to utilize that parking there. So I'll follow up with the Code Enforcement Attorney's Office on that. There are also questions about whether or not there are enough signs in the municipal parking lot north of the downtown. You know, we've changed the parking regulations in there and color coded by restriping the lot. So I have no personal knowledge of that because I don't have any time to go to that parking lot. But you know, we're going to follow up with that on them. And also,
I can get you all those.
Yeah.
Because when we installed some right at the front entrance, they're installed on the back side, the north side, and then also in to the new area. But I can get you pictures and place them for you.
Okay, appreciate that.
Yeah, I worked with Ken Galanti on that too, because initially we were thinking about putting them inside the asphalt, but he recommended not doing that because you decrease the life expectancy of the asphalt with heaving, and then also people would probably just run into them,
right?
You know, or run them over, as we've seen on other.
Yeah, and we don't have any lights in that parking lot, which is another kind of ongoing discussion at ACAC. There is interest in having some more lighting in that parking lot, and they seem to be quite satisfied and happy with the solar lights. Obviously, the advantage of that is you don't have to, put any underground cabling and tear up the parking lot, which was resurfaced not that long ago. And you could just add some more lights without that kind of disturbance. Perhaps some signs could be placed on those light poles as well. Let's see. Also, we need to contact the state. Apparently, the median between St. Michael's and the shopping area has not been maintained and mowed, and it's getting quite tall, apparently. And that's not something that the town has the authority to.
Yeah, I would almost. So when I was ACAC liaison, we brought that up, and I think I even we tried to outreach about putting a concrete stamp on there, or even make it, or just to brick it over, because the state doesn't come out DOT doesn't come out and doesn't do it, and just, it's like this tall.
Right.
So that was one of the thoughts on there. Yeah, I know we mentioned that. And
We like the meadow restorations and the pollinator gardens, but that one is not probably the right location.
Yeah.
And I think that's it for my liaison report. Yeah, I think I covered it all. Brad, I saw, we had, you had stepped out when I closed out public comment, but did you want to address the board?
Thanks.
You just introduce yourself, give us your name.
Brad Brooks. I'm a resident of Springs, not the Springs. I guess Springs is the correct way of saying it. A couple of things I would say in terms of these vandalism areas, maybe some security cameras, even fake security cameras might deter these people.
I'm sorry, could you speak into the mic a little bit closer? I'm having a little trouble hearing.
Okay, I'm pretty close, but in terms of vandalism, maybe think about some security cameras. That might be a cheap way to reduce that problem. The streetlight issue, I'm glad you guys are talking about that. I came to the Natural Resources Department 5 years ago about the issue, tried to introduce it at the Energy and Sustainability Committee several times with really no traction. It's something that should be simple for the town to do. I mean, you should save money, should be good for the environment. Hopefully this year, I guess you guys after.
We did replace all the lighting in downtown Montauk with LEDs in 2017, I think.
Yeah, no, I'd be curious to see the PSC&G study. I personally don't want to get into the weeds. I doubt there's 700 lights as somebody who drives around the town, but hopefully what lights we do have will be upgraded. The reason I really came today was about the airport, which is obviously a big issue here. We realize a hot button issue. I think, I congratulate the town for doing the studies in the past couple of years that show economically it's really negligible benefit keeping the airport open. But what I do think, and I have no idea what you're going to do, but since the issue of potentially closing it has been brought up, I think the town really should do a study on what the other benefits would be of using that property for something other than an airport. I think as you're all aware, there are 200 acres of open land there, as I've had things sent to all of you at least once. If you did do a community solar project there with just half the land, you probably could set up a community solar program that would benefit potentially 2,000 residents of this town, which would allow them to lower their costs by 10% from what they're paying PSC&G now. Most of these people would not be able to go to solar otherwise. So I think right there, that's a huge benefit. But the other benefit is the town would probably get about $1 million a year in lease income. I don't know what it would ever make as an airport. So just from those 2 points of view, I think the town should really seriously consider permanently closing the airport. And there should really be a serious study done. What could be done with that land? I mean, it's not just solar, which would be a great idea, but you've talked about housing. This would also be, there could potentially be another 100 acres there for housing. Not that you'd use it all for housing. But I think if there's one big issue the town, this is a great opportunity, I think, for the future to solve a lot of different problems the town faces. So I hope, I realize these things take time, and it ends up being expensive to use consultants, but I encourage the town to finally seriously look at what the benefits could be if you close the airport. Thanks.
Thank you, Brad. We do have a few resolutions.
We do.
This afternoon, David, I think you have the first.
Yes, I'd like to offer resolution 2022-768. This is a budget modification for street lighting. This is for emergency repairs that we had to do at Cedar Street and North Main Street. We're going to move $5,000 from full-time salaries and $6,000 from New York State retirement to budget line for subcontractor costs in the amount of $11,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass and carried.
Resolution 2022-769 is another budget modification for the Highway Department, bringing $50,000 from drainage maintenance to $50,000 for communications.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass and carried.
I'd like to offer resolution 2022-770. This is the hire of surveyor for 395 Panago Affordable Housing Subdivision. Whereas we need to have a map and plan designed, and we'd like to hire Gary Benz, landscape surveyor, at the amount not to exceed $8,000 to do so.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass and carried. Any other resolutions to offer?
No.
Okay.
I make
We do have a number of issues to discuss in exec.
I make a motion, we go into exec for personnel, CPF, leases, and advice of counsel. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. Shall we reconvene at 2:00?
Yes.
Great. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. I'll send out the Zoom shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, everybody. Stay safe and be well. Thank you.